Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. At the time that I'm recording this video, it's about 10 hours until the start of Zizaran's Gauntlet event. Zizaran's Gauntlet event is a Path of Exile race that has grown far beyond the original small beginnings that it had, and it's become the biggest esport in Path of Exile. So this is an event where it's Path of Exile on extreme hard mode. It's a hardcore solo self-found only event, and it has all of the following private league mods in play. Greater multiple projectiles, so monsters fire 4 additional projectiles, which can sometimes overlap on some bosses, causing players to get hit by multiple ones of them at a time. Unique monsters have 80% increased life, and this stacks multiplicatively with the other monster life mod, so to a total of 116% increased life. Monsters have 70% increased AoE, monsters have 20% more life, and monsters have 20% more damage and action speed, so movement, attack, and cast speed. All of this combines to make Path of Exile feel pretty unfair, although it's not so unfair that it can't be beaten. And there will be players who beat pretty much every boss fight in the game with these rules during the 10-day event. So I've got a few tips here, but I did want to start with one that's not technically a tip in the truest sense, and that is a suggestion for the mindset to have going into this. Some of you watching this video are top 0.05% players. You're the sort of player who has hit level 95 within 3 days in hardcore solo self-found at league start before. You're the sort of player that seriously competes for league first kills of Cyrus or the Maven or the like, and you're absolutely confident in your ability to kill Cyrus within 24 to 36 hours of league start in a normal league without dying. If you're in that category, congratulations, this tip isn't for you. If you're not in that category though, what I want to suggest you do is that you don't take the prizes in this event too seriously. So I've seen a lot of chatter from people who are playing solely for the goal of hitting level 50 for the mystery box and that don't expect to have fun in the event. If you're not having fun, I want to suggest to you that you should not let the prizes motivate you to keep playing. Gauntlet should be enjoyable. You wouldn't work 6 hours in a job for a chance at a $3 mystery box. If the event feels like a job, walk away. On the flip side, it is very much possible to have fun playing this event without being competitive. I went into it in 3.14, 3.15, both times knowing there was no way I was going to be competitive. There's no way I was anywhere even remotely close to the players that were going to be fighting the Maven on, day 4 or 5 of the event. And I was proven right. I was nowhere near it. In fact, I didn't complete the axe either time. But both times I had fun. I should see the prizes as a small bonus that you probably won't get, and enjoy the event whether you're competing against your own personal best or whether you're competing to dethrone the reigning champion or to claim bounties. I actually personally had more fun watching the 3.15 Gauntlet than I did playing, and so after I sort of got into a bad mood after a death, was my own stupid fault, I then ended up just watching a whole bunch of other people playing, and I had a lot of fun doing that. If you do spectate, you'll get the Wrangler portal if you watch 2 hours of Path of Exile on Twitch during the first 24 hours of Gauntlet. There is a link down in the description below to a Path of Exile forum thread that will give some information on how to connect your Path of Exile and Twitch accounts in order to claim this. These connections, even if you've done it in the past, these connections were severed about 2 months ago in response to Twitch being hacked. So you can get this from watching Gauntlet content, and I personally intend to watch Shack Central, DS Lily, Steel Mage, Lighty7, I'm Exile, and probably more people playing it. Or you can watch other Path of Exile content, such as me continuing in Endless Delve for the next couple of days. Because I'm still having a lot of fun in Endless Delve. I'm going to keep playing that. So tip 1 is to consider playing a champion, the Champion Ascendancy. So this Ascendancy gained a lot from the armor and evasion buffs that took place in 3.16. Basically, both of those defenses had their effectiveness roughly doubled, and additionally, the determination and grace auras were buffed to the stratosphere. So both of these changes, both the increase of the baseline effectiveness of armor, the increase of the baseline effectiveness of evasion, the increased power of determination, and the increased power of grace, all of these combine in the Ascendancy of the Champion. All of them combine, Champion can take advantage of all of these buffs. It also lost nothing from the Fortify nerfs, nor from the Acrobatics nerf. The Champion is also in a position on the passive tree where it can put spell suppression gear to good use, and it is close to Iron Reflexes on the tree. Iron Reflexes, Grace, Determination, Cast when damage taken, Molten Shell, and a Granite Flask is an incredible defensive layer, that can enable you to tank ridiculous hits like Shaper Slams. Subject to some limitations, you can also use a manually cast Molten Shell too. Although I don't recommend doing this unless you've got some experience with this. But one of my preferred playstyles is to have a cast when damage taken Molten Shell at a low gem level, and also to have a manually cast level 20 Molten Shell. And then if I'm expecting damage and my Molten Shell is not on cooldown, I hit the manual cast one. If I'm not expecting damage though, and I do take some, then the smaller Molten Shell from my cast when damage taken will pop in and save me if there's a second hit that's going to follow up the first one. So this combination is really, really strong. You definitely don't need the manual cast version. You can just use the automated version if you want. But I'd suggest experimenting with both and making a decision as to how you want to have your character defend itself. The champion's also really versatile as an ascendancy. Whilst thematically it's about melee combat, it's also pretty good for bow attack builds, and it's even capable of being pushed into a spellcaster role. Of course, this is going to mean that the competition for the top 5 champion slots will be incredibly high, and so you might want to forge a different path instead if you want to be competitive in the main event. You might find that a less contested class might be more suitable. So tip 2 is don't underestimate Act 1. Act 1 has been nerfed a lot from previous gauntlets, especially compared to the 3.15 one. This is because of the different mod selection, the lack of 30% of physical damage added as each element, which is particularly brutal in Act 1 when your resistances are low. However, Act 1 is still not free. Brutus and Mudflats will be much easier than in previous gauntlets, but Mavail will be harder. Mavail will have 116% more life than the base game, and additionally, she'll be firing 5 projectiles with her Icicle Barrage, which will mean that it will cover a much wider area on the screen and be much more dangerous. Helena's crafting bench will be your salvation. You'll be able to craft a bunch of cold resistance gear that will be excellent, and you should absolutely make sure that you go into Mavail with capped cold resistance. But don't neglect fire resistance either. The second phase, there is some fire damage as well, and you definitely don't want to be in a situation where you're laughing off all of Mavail's cold damage, and then suddenly an exploding squid gets you. Tip 3. You want to have some plans, or at least be willing to change your plans, for the very, very best unique items in the game, should you happen to get one. So, at the same rarity as Chevron's Wrappings, believed to be 25 times rarer than Tabula Rasa, is March of the Legion. This is a strong contender for the best item in the game at the moment, excluding like a couple of chase items like Mage Blood, and it's every bit as good in Gauntlet as it is in the normal game. You probably personally won't get a March of the Legion during your Gauntlet attempt, and that also applies even if you are one of the top players. But if it does drop, you might want to drop everything and level a character just for this item. Among the very best players in Gauntlet, most players won't see this item, but a couple of them will, and the ones that do will do much better than everyone else that's of comparable skill, because this item is just so overwhelmingly powerful at the moment. You should also consider doing the same for the rarer top tier uniques should you get one like a Miracle Squire or Mage Blood or Headhunter. If you get one of these items, which is much less likely than March of the Legion, even those 3 items put together are much rarer than March of the Legion, then you should definitely try to find a way to put them to use. So tip 4 is to fear projectile boss skills, especially Act 5 Katava. So bosses that usually fire 1 projectile will instead fire 5, and they will also have increased AoE. This makes it much harder to dodge all of these shots. Many bosses have projectiles you can easily endure even in hardcore. A good example of this is Katava's Throw Debris skill, Act 5 Katava, which you may not even notice in the normal game. I certainly didn't know it existed until I lost my 3.14 Gauntlet character to it. This can be particularly lethal with additional projectiles because multiple of them can hit you at once. So before fighting major projectile bosses, level up and go in with a very clear mind. If you need to get your rest before you go into these bosses. The projectile bosses that come to mind are Act 1 Mavail, Act 3 the first time you fight Piety. So this is one that everyone always underestimates because it's really easy in the core game. This is the one where you get Tolman's Bracelet before you enter the sewers. This Piety will fire a single ball lightning at you, except it's going to be 5 in this event. Act 4 Piety, because of all of the balls she fires that leave lingering stuff on the ground, they're projectiles, so you got to watch out for them here. Act 4 Doedre. Act 4 Chevron, I think is really easy to underestimate again, but with 4 additional projectiles could be really mean. Act 4 Malachi, particularly Phase 1, Act 5 Kitava, Act 6 Rizlatha. You definitely probably don't want to fight that until you've got quite a bit of chaos resistance. Act 7 Ralakesh, Act 7 Arakali, Act 9 Chevron, Act 9 Depraved Trinity, and Act 10 Kitava. And just entirely skip Act 10 Valenta. She is ridiculous in this game mode because she has some projectiles that can really just kill you out of nowhere, and they fire quite a way off. They move really fast to start with. She's just brutal. I honestly think that most players, unless you're extremely confident with all of her mechanics, you probably do not want to do Valenta, even on a character that's level 90. Just make do without that skill point. You also want to fear map bosses of these map versions of these bosses, plus the Forbidden Woods map. Tip 5 is to avoid Delve, Heist, and Scourge. So Delve is very, very dangerous. If you want to win, you'll have to Delve, but for everyone else, I think you should avoid it like the plague. And the reason for this is that if you go into Delve early on, you'll find that the more powerful monsters in Delve than the monsters are in the storyline will rip you a new one. If you go in there later on, though, you'll be forced to go to fairly high monster levels in order to get reasonable amounts of Azurite. And once you do that, you're going to have basically no lighting. And that's going to make Delve really, really difficult. Heist, on the other hand, is lucrative but extremely dangerous when Gauntlet mods interact with dangerous rare monsters. And when I'm talking dangerous rare monsters here, I mean rare monsters that have got auras. Monsters that have got increased speed, auras, increased physical damage auras, all these sorts of things can be really lethal when you've got them in conjunction with the Gauntlet mods. If you do decide to do Heist, be very, very careful in them and treat them like they're 8 to 10 monster levels higher than they actually are. As for Scourge, you probably always want to tab out before 75 stacks, and only go that far with extreme care. You can consider the drive-by Vaal skill use trick, where you jump into the Krangleverse, immediately fire off a Vaal skill, and then just focus on mechanically dodging monsters, let that Vaal skill kill everything it's going to kill, and then jump back out of the Krangleverse as soon as the game allows you to. Vaal Molten Shell is also your friend here, as something that can provide you with a huge ablative shield of hit points before you go in. But do be aware that Vaal Molten Shell is not 100% mitigation or anything close to it. It takes the edge off attacks, and you want it to reduce attacks by enough that the rest of your character's defenses can keep you alive, not just rely upon it entirely. So tip 6 is a build suggestion. So I'm not going to outline all the details of the Seismic Saboteur here. I think people that are going into the Gauntlet event know where to find resources on builds. But winning this event or pushing to level 95 is going to require that you do some heavy boss killing. I feel like 3 Watchstone Conquerors are going to be mandatory to get that far, and obviously winning the event is going to take you beating a lot more bosses than just 3 Watchstone Conquerors. And the best low investment boss killer in the game is the Seismic Saboteur, which scales Seismic Trap and often uses Exsanguinate for trash clearing. This boss isn't super tanky, so you'll need tight mechanical play to dodge significant boss attacks, as well as knowledge of which ones you can endure, and you'll need situational awareness to survive when you get surprised by aura rares. However, you'll be rewarded with amazing damage by the time you hit about gem level 18, and it only gets better at 19, 20, or 21. The build can be played scaling physical hit damage, aura's cold conversion, or scaling poison damage. And there's also some oddball ways of playing it, but I think that those are the main 3 that people will use. And it can even be played as a different ascendancy if you want to get spicy. So anyways, that's my tips for the upcoming Gauntlet. Most importantly though, make sure you have fun, and may your Vaal Orbs have interesting results. If you're playing to win, then I wish you good luck. And if you're playing to beat your personal best, then I also wish you good luck in that endeavour.